Parliament, Honorable Shandana Kulzar Khan, Member of the National Assembly of Pakistan and the Chairperson of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians, Honorable Dr. Zainab Gimba, Member of the National Assembly of Nigeria and Chairperson of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians, Africa Region, Representative Honorable Veronica Cady Sesai, Member of Parliament of Sierra Leone and the CWP representative for the West Africa region, Honorable Murray Wenger, Chief Whip of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, members of the provincial legislatures both in South Africa and beyond our borders, representatives from the South African Legislative Sector Support, representatives from the National Conference of State Legislatures in the United States of America, members of the NGO and NPO sector. In her absence, Representative Sharon Tomiko Santos from the Washington State Legislature. A very good day to you all, across all parts of the globe and in different time zones. On behalf of the Western Cape Women Parliamentarians, we are honored to have you participate on this special occasion marking Women's Month in South Africa. As Michelle Obama once so aptly said, and I quote, "No country can ever truly flourish if it stifles the potential of its women and deprives itself of the contributions of half of its citizens." And as complex as that may seem, we as parliamentarians and legislators are here today to bring bold resolutions to the table that could assist in changing the crises women face in this country. Today's session centers on the broad theme, placing the dignity and innate rights of women in the spotlight. I emphasize dignity as the basis of this theme. And Donna Hicks, the author of Dignity, the essential role it plays in resolving conflict, explains it so perfectly, and I quote, she says, "The most common response people offer is that dignity is about respect. To the contrary," she says, "dignity is not the same as respect. Dignity is our inherent value and worth as human beings. Everyone is born with it. Respect, on the other hand, is earned through one's actions. After people learn about dignity, a remarkable thing happens," she says. "Everyone recognizes that we all have a deep human desire to be treated as something of value." Today's speakers and breakaway sessions will look at the broader issues that specifically feed into the legislative space. We are hoping that the ideas and the resolutions that come out from today will be bold and will show courage and commitment to changing the trajectory of women in South Africa. There will be 3 sub-themes discussed in the breakaway sessions and will be streamed live on our YouTube channel today. The themes are addressing the gender pay gap, and we know that South Africa sits at approximately a 30% gap estimate. We will also engage on the adoption of a gender-responsive budget, which used to exist in South Africa but no longer is being applied. And we will talk about the increasing of enrollment of women in STEM-related university programs. To the women of this province, we honor you as we engage on these big issues. We look forward to today's program as we unpack the difficult challenges that women face. As women parliamentarians and ultimately as legislators, we commit to bringing tangible resolutions to this Parliament that can make the meaning change we all seek. I thank you. Just a few notes before we actually begin the program. I would like to ensure that all participants actually make sure that their microphones are being muted. Please use the raise hand function if you would like the opportunity to speak, and wait until you've been recognized by the presiding officer. Participants are kindly requested to unmute their microphones when they are recognized by the presiding officer, and to please mute their microphones when they have finished speaking. Participants are requested not to sign into MS Teams on more than one device, so either on your laptop or on your cell phone. And before we start with the formal proceedings, some of the participants in our event have not yet indicated exactly which breakaway session they would like to attend. I would appreciate it if you could just write that in the chat function so that the officials can assign you to the correct session before we get onto the program. And of course, as it is a live event, I forgot a very important part, which I suppose is quite usual, and that was to introduce myself. So my apologies to everyone that doesn't really know who I am. So my name is Beverly Schaefer, and I am the Deputy Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. We will now go on to the formal proceedings. I invite the Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, Honourable Masizolium Kasela, who has been a long-time politician and is serving as Speaker in this House during this term, to actually take and give us his welcome message. Welcome, welcome, Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I must say that this feels so beautiful. You know, when you started talking about having this platform and inviting all these guests, I knew exactly what we can expect, but I didn't know it will go this far. So I just want to say thank you very much to you, Deputy Speaker, and for putting this program together with our outstanding CWP, Western Cape Provincial Parliament branch, and of course with the phenomenal staff members of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, who have tirelessly worked very hard to ensure that this event does succeed. I would like to welcome the members of the executive in our Western Cape government who are present here, and those who have tendered apologies. I would like to really appreciate the participation in this particular event. And of course, I would not have done justice, Honourable Deputy Speaker, if I don't mention just the name of our dear friend, Honourable Shandana Khan. I want to say thank you, ma'am, again, and welcome for joining us. We miss seeing each other in person, but you know that soon that time will come again. To the honourable members of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, I wish to welcome you all. And of course, to all the guests who are representing organizations in the entire province, and to the distinguished guests who are connecting from the international organizations, and of course, to everybody that has taken time to be part of this event. The Deputy Speaker has welcomed you all and mentioned you by name, and I don't want to hurt anyone by not mentioning you, so I will say all protocols observed. That is what we do in South Africa. That means everyone has been acknowledged. Honourable Deputy Speaker, I do wish, and of course I hope, that as we embark today in this program, we will speak essentially on what exactly it means as the Western Cape Provincial Parliament to be representing the people of this province, and what does it mean to the women who find themselves without voice, and what does it mean to women who have no food? What does it mean to children, girl children who are sitting at home without any prospects of hope because the environment that they find themselves does not seem to be as equal in terms of the standards that we expect? So I do expect that in terms of the Article 1 of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. That will be able to articulate what does this mean for the people of the Western Cape, represented by the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, Act 108 of 1996, which guarantees a full range of rights to all citizens, the rights to life, dignity, privacy, and many more. What does this mean to the people of the Western Cape as we articulate here today? Section 9, titled Equality, however, specifically protects the rights of women, Honorable Deputy Speaker, and it states that the state may not unfairly discriminate or indirectly directly or indirectly against anyone on one or more grounds, including race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or gender, origin, color, sexual orientation, age, disability, religion, conscience, belief, culture, language, and birth. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the prohibition of discrimination on the grounds of gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status is deliberately intended to protect women. So the gender pay parity that the Deputy Speaker mentioned and many other issues that will be articulated here today is one of the serious inequalities that we've seen in our generation, both as humanity and of course as politicians. So we need to really find solutions, and of course in dealing with the issues of gender-based violence, femicide, the issues of rape, sexual harassment, the murder and the brutal killings that we've seen of our women in the province and nationally. Also dealing with the rights of the LGBTQIA plus communities, and of course, Honorable Deputy Speaker, the issues of homophobia are real issues. Queerphobia and transphobia are real issues. So I would like to encourage you all, as I welcome you all here today, that is this provincial parliament, we are greatly honored and really appreciate your presence here. And we do hope that you are going to engage honestly and truthfully in finding solutions to the daily challenges that confront us. And it cannot be a better moment, Deputy Speaker. This is the great time in history. In the height of COVID-19 pandemic, that this parliament has chosen to continue with this particular provincial women's parliament, which is now an international women's parliament. Don't call it anything else. It's an international women's parliament, because we've got all of these guests from everywhere, and also to appreciate what we have done to invite the other provincial parliaments, you know, the staff from other parliaments, and obviously some of our colleagues, you know, members of parliament who have been invited to participate here today. But I am very much standing here elated at the work that you have done with the CWP branch, and I think Honorable Khan will be very much pleased that the work that she started here to come and launch this branch, that this branch has done so much that it has invited all these beautiful people here on this platform. Our work is not done. We have just begun. And I can say that the Deputy Speaker and all these breakaways, you will see that there's different members of parliament who are going to be chairing some of the sessions here. It's a multi-party dimension, and it's women who come from different political dimensions, from different political backgrounds, different philosophies, but what binds these women here is the fact that we need to fight for the rights of every woman, the rights of every woman, all women in the Western Cape, and of course in ensuring that those who are professionals and those who have no school and those who are well educated do find resonance in the work that we do as the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, that we don't represent a particular grouping and leave other sectors and be elitist as this parliament. So this parliament is a parliament of all people. We speak for every woman, for all women. Those who have a voice in this parliament are able to elevate the voices of the voiceless. And that is very important as you continue here today. And I will not be participating in the program, and I will not be staying throughout the program, but I will stick around just to watch. All I wanted to do here was to appreciate and welcome you here. I do know that this will be a successful event. The Deputy Speaker has told me that there's nothing that is as exciting as what she has been able to work and put together with the CWP branch and our provincial parliament staff. And for that matter, Deputy Speaker, you must pat yourself in the back, because it's not easy to put a program online and get people to attend on time. We've waited in some fora where you start, the event starts an hour later and you get apologies all the time. We're still waiting. But here, your guest arrived on time. And remember, we've got 5 districts in the Western Cape, from the Overberg, the Garden Route, Central Karoo, West Coast, and the Cape Winelands, including the city of Cape Town, Cape Metropole. These women are here. And you told me, Deputy Speaker, that you will also be taking this to the districts afterwards. And that is something that is unique about this Women's Parliament. So thank you very much and good luck to you all, and may God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Thank you for the support. Without our entire team of parliamentarians, we just can't work and get this together. So thank you very much. I would like to now move on to the next part of the program. Honourable Shandana Gulzar Khan is the chairperson of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians CWP network, and as a member of the National Assembly of Pakistan. A legal professional with extensive knowledge and experience in international trade, economic law and policy, she has written on Pakistan's first IP framework, e-commerce policy and GI law. Besides having served as Parliamentary Secretary for Commerce and Industry, Honourable Shandana chairs the Subcommittee on Agricultural Products, focusing on women farmers, workers and youth. She also heads the Parliamentary Task Force on the SDGs 5 and is helping develop Pakistan's first SDG roadmap. Part of that work is focusing on quick results for girl-child marriage restraint legislation. Honourable Shandana is also serving in committees on industry and production, privatisation and planning and development. It is my absolute honour to have Honourable Shandana Khan here this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Deputy Speaker Beverly Schaefer. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
You are audible.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm also, it's a pity the Honourable Speaker couldn't stay any longer, because it was such a pleasure to see him after what seems like a very long time. COVID feels like 7 lifetimes rolled into one. And I wanted to, at the outset, state both my gratitude for both your friendship and the way I was treated when I was in Western Cape, the invitation which was given to the CWP, the way Mr. Ahmad Patience, who I hope is here in this meeting, and the kind of things we discussed, because even though, Deputy Speaker, you invited me to the event, but, oh, great, the Speaker's here. Good to see you, Honourable Speaker. I really wanted to make the point that without male champions of gender equality, we're not going anywhere. We need male champions who believe that gender equality is beyond women's rights and human rights and being out on the street and protesting. So for me, that in itself was an incredible experience, because I saw that if a single province in South Africa could do a turnaround so quickly, reviving the women caucus, the CWP branch of the Western Cape, it could not have been possible. That's not to take strength away from you, Honourable Beverly Schaefer, but to say that the fact that the speaker stood behind you was visible to all of us observing from CWP and CPA based in London. So thank you all. Also, it's a pleasure to see my friend, Honorable Dr. Zainab Gimba here. She is the chair of CWP Africa. She's also the vice chair of CWP International. And I think it's a rather good day for me. I don't know if I mentioned to you, I nearly didn't make it to our meeting today. As we speak, I'm in Zambia as an electoral monitor for the Commonwealth. And we've been experiencing Wi-Fi blackouts and internet blackouts since yesterday afternoon. So right now I am on an illegal app called a VPN, just because I had to attend this meeting. But it's a pleasure. Thank you all for inviting me today. Thank you for keeping the CWP in the loop, because I find that perhaps when it comes to resolving women parliamentarians' issues, women staffer issues, and women's issues overall, we're 50% of the population. We may not be 50% of parliaments, but we are 50% of all national populations. And so until and unless we're made a priority by those who work with us, who sit with us, and as I mentioned, your Honourable Speaker of the Western Cape Province, things will not go very far. As discussed previously, Honourable Deputy Speaker, I would like to focus on a couple of things. And since I'm here at this event, request for help both from CWP Africa and from South African parliaments as a whole. You're aware that because of this pandemic, the world has shifted gears rapidly, and coping has been mentally difficult, because we were in a certain comfort zone where men were bad, women were good, corporations were bad, NGOs were good. All that has flown out of the window during the pandemic. And we've been forced to, sorry, I think somebody's speaker's on. And so this pandemic has forced us to look at problems in a different way, because in some sense, we don't have the time. We just don't have the time to wait and see what happens in the next electoral cycle. We all know very well that women's development issues, I will not call them human rights issues, I'll call them development issues, are closely linked to electoral finance. That is the bottom line for me. That is what I have observed. If as a woman you don't bring value to the table in your constituency, in your electoral system, then your issues will also not make it to the decision-making table. They will not make it to the finance ministry. So, given how the four topics you have picked today, and I find them incredibly important. You're talking about LGBTQ, you're talking about women in STEM, which is science, technology, mathematics, engineering. You're also talking about the gender pay gap, and you're also talking about gender-sensitive budgeting. Now, I guess in some sense I'll be politically incorrect, but I guess it's important to set out at the outset that women in STEM is not a politically correct subject. People don't want to talk about it because these are hidden biases. Why would anyone talk about women in science and technology? There are no barriers to science and technology for women. Where are they? Show us the barriers. But when you look at the supply chain of how women start as a little girl from the day she gets to parliament or to her office or to her bank or to her as a nursing hospital, women will face countless barriers that men may also face, but you'll face it at a disproportional strength. So first, yourself as a woman worthy of being accepted in your workspace, and then you have to prove yourself as a professional worthy of being in that space. My male colleagues don't have to do that. Now, I could either cry about it or I could accept it and work with worthy male colleagues. For example, the UN program. And this I would urge you, Honorable Speaker, if you could look this up, and Deputy Speaker, if you could push this. The United Nations program, the UN Women program, which is called, it's literally an ACT, he for she, male champions of gender equality. And I was lucky that after South Africa, after Western Cape, I went to Iceland, where I had the pleasure of meeting the Icelandic president, who is the Icelandic champion for the He for She program. He has adopted it. He is their spokesperson. And as the joke goes, I have a mother, he said, I have a wife and I have 3 daughters. So there is no way I cannot champion for their equality. And so if the Western Cape Parliament could start with this and spread to all of the rest of South Africa, and also request you, Honorable Dr. Zainab Gimba, if you could champion this, talk to CPA Africa that let every male speaker, every male deputy speaker become the spokesperson and the point person for the He for She program of UN Women. That is my first request from the CWP International side to everyone. That is important. You will see the progress you will make. It will be very quick. Number 2, I would recommend everyone to read the papers that have been prepared by the Western Cape Parliament. They're very well written papers. They're self-explanatory. They explain a lot of things about what is going wrong and what are the quick solutions. Because I think in the pandemic, what we cannot afford to do as a global sisterhood is to wait for others to give us the solutions. We'll have to create them. And there's nothing wrong in that. If we're being asked to step up, we asked for power. Now we've been given power. Let's exercise it. My third request to you today is that the Commonwealth women parliamentarians, both me and Honorable Dr. Zainab Gimba, we worked very hard over the last 2 years since we took office to produce products, to produce documents, to produce policies that would help the entire women in the Commonwealth. Now, since our election was September, October 2019, and the COVID lockdown started happening as early as January and February 2020, we didn't have much time to get any work done because travel was required, meetings were required. So what we've done in that time is we've released 3 important things. We did modules with the IPU, which were focusing on SDG 5, Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is part of the Agenda 2030. And those videos are for male parliamentarians to understand what does it mean to advance women's equality and empowerment in a political context. We've also produced, in collaboration with the APF, the sister version of CWP, the Francophonie, we got guidelines from them on anti-harassment. And I have to thank you, Honorable Schaefer, that if you recall, you had mentioned to me while I was in the Western Cape that female staffers of the Western Cape wanted to meet with me to discuss. And one question which they put to me, which I found heartbreaking at one point, they said, Madam, if you cannot protect, me being CWP, women staffers in the Western Cape, how can you expect to protect the country? How can you expect to protect the continent? And that hit me really hard. And so we teamed up with APF. We got the Quebec anti-harassment guidelines. And now we have sent those approved guidelines as per CWP vetting. And 180 different branches of of Commonwealth Parliaments have those guidelines. So I would request through your good offices speaker, through your good offices deputy speaker, to ensure that those guidelines are adopted in all of South Africa by each parliament separately. And once those are done, they are actually, because it's not a legislative piece that you have to do, it's a policy document that will come into all contracts for all women that are hired by your parliament. So not only women parliamentarians, but also female and even junior male staffers who might be victims of targeted harassment. They have protection, statutory protection through their contracts. The third thing that CWP, Dr. Zainab Gimba and I did was creating a gender sensitization toolkit with our lovely team in London, which is Benit, James, Aksa. And we were incredibly lucky that we got Dr. Sarah Childs, who's an expert on women parliamentarian issues. That is a toolkit, again, which all of CWP Africa, as well as Western Cape, could be the starting point to adopt those policy guidelines and actually have a roadshow in your parliament, sensitizing both female and we know that there is the female patriarchy as well. It's not just, man is not the enemy. We have patriarchy, which is what's settled in our bones. So if we could adopt those guidelines, run those through, it's COVID times, people don't have much to do. That's not to say parliamentarians are not working, but those 3 things would be so useful as a concrete follow on from what we discussed in Western Cape for what has been happening in CWP International, and let Africa lead as always. Because I have to say, Dr. Zainab Gimba was kind. She invited me to Arusha in October 2019, right after our election, where I observed CWP Africa in action. And I have to say, I'm very impressed. CWP, at present, we're working on a constitution, but we don't have CWP Africa does. CWP Africa does. So I would request everyone here today that given that you are miles ahead of many of us in the Commonwealth, ahead of 180 different parliaments, be the first to adopt these. I'll be incredibly grateful. And perhaps final word on gender budgeting and the pay gap. I think it's high time we recognize that it's one thing to protect women from violence, another to give them political rights, another to give them human rights. But till women don't have financial inclusivity in our policy, in our finance ministry, in our national budgets, I'm afraid the game is going to stay where it is. And I don't know if you remember, I've been following the feminist movement in the United States for many years. And there was Germaine Greer from the UK, a lot of people from the United States. And these women did say one thing which was interesting. It was tough at the time, but it was interesting. They said that when we started the women's equality movement, we didn't promise you equality culturally, because cultures take their own time in changing. We promised you financial equality. We promised you economic equality. So maybe if we focus on that, we will have far better results than focusing on cultural problems that we all face in our own jurisdictions and international jurisdictions. I think I've done my 10 minutes. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all for being a lovely group of people to talk to. I will stay online, but you'll not be able to see me because, as I said, I'm working on a VPN and I'm headed for the airport in about half an hour. So you'll excuse me that I may not be able to respond to questions if there are any directly, but if you were to send them in writing through the good offices of the Honourable Speaker, Deputy Speaker, or to Kimba, I'm very happy to do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Khan. Before you go and before you switch your screen off, I would just like to recognise Premier Alan Winde, who's very kindly and has made some time to actually log on, Honourable Khan. So he's here while you have been speaking, and I thank him for making some time to be able to do that. Really a great pleasure. Thank you, Premier. That means a lot, and I know that Honourable Khan feels the same way, and I know you are a great proponent for women's rights and women equality. So thank you very, very much. Before I carry on and ask Honourable Chief Whip Winger to just come on, I'd just like to ask those that are not speaking, may I please ask that you switch your cameras off so that the feed is actually correctly proportioned. So please, if you are only viewing at the moment, please switch your camera off. But before you do anything, Honourable Khan, I would like to hand over to Honourable Chief Whip Breakaway Winger. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It really is my privilege as the Chief Whip
Have we lost Honourable Winger? It seems we have. If I can just ask the IT staff. Honourable Winger, are you there?
Am I back online?
Yes, would you start again?
There we are, my apologies. Thank you again. It's my privilege as the Chief Whip of the Legislature to give a vote of thanks to Honourable Shandana Gulzar Khan. As we know, the theme of today's Women's Parliament is placing the dignity and the innate rights of women in the spotlight. And as women parliamentarians, we indeed have a responsibility to shine a light on the systemic problems that prevent women from realising their potential and affording them dignity and ensuring their rights. Last year, women parliamentarians, for the first time, reached 25% globally. But this just also highlights how far away we are from true representation and adequate participation of women in politics. But it's not just about the numbers. Aisha Tariam, the first Middle Eastern female editor-in-chief of an English language newspaper, said there needs to be a fundamental shift in the way societies view women in government, one that does not see them as mere seat fillers or stats on a chart. They must be viewed as a vital contributing factor to the betterment of the world. Honourable Shandana Gulzar Khan is one of those women who is a vital contributor to the betterment of our world. And at a time when the stakes couldn't be higher and our collective future is in jeopardy. It really struck me when she said that as women parliamentarians with levers of power, we need to create opportunities for change and should review systemic, often hidden barriers in all their complexity so that we can solve these problems. And so, on behalf of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament and the Women's Caucus, I'd like to extend our sincere thanks to her, not only for her leadership of the CWP, but for the incredible insights and inspiration she has provided us with today, as well as the very many women she inspires each and every day to continue the struggle for the realization of women's dignity and rights. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chief Whip Breakaway Winger. Thank you for your time. Honourable Shandana Khan, thank you once again. and always making time for us. We will move on now. I'd like to welcome Honourable Zainab Gimba, who is currently the chairperson of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians for the Africa region and vice chairman for the CWP International. She started her public service career as a lecturer in the Department of Public Administration, University of Maiduguri, Nigeria in 2002. Before her election to Parliament, she had at different times between 2011 and 2018 served as Commissioner in charge of Poverty Alleviation and Youth Empowerment, Universal Basic Education Board, and Water Resources in her home state of Borno in Nigeria. Honourable Gimba's outstanding public service delivery was rewarded when her people prevailed on her to represent them at the Nigeria House of Representatives. Thus, she was elected in 2019 to represent Ngala, Mbama, and Kala Federal Constituency in the Nigeria House of Representatives. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree and a Master of Public Administration from the University of Maiduguri in the Borno state of Nigeria. Her quest for knowledge saw her proceeding to the University of Abuja, Nigeria, to pursue a course of study in public administration and policy analysis, leading to the award of a PhD in public administration and policy analysis in 2008. She is also a fellow Chartered Institute of Public Diplomacy and Management, a member of the Development Study Association, United Kingdom, and many other professional bodies. Honourable Gimba has received many rewards and recognitions from professional and trade union bodies in Nigeria for her service in community development and empowerment of vulnerable women. In her few years as Member of Parliament, Honourable Gimba has demonstrated keen interest and promotion of gender-related issues. Honourable Gimba, it is a great privilege to have you here this morning. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you so much, Honourable Deputy Speaker, Fabulous Kepa, and all other participants. Thank you. And I should thank Honourable Shandana, my chair, for having her time to be present at this all-important program. Am I audible?
You are audible and you may proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Well, before I go into my brief presentation, I would like us to pay tribute to our late chairperson, late Her Excellency Honorable Lifaka Majua, who we lost this year, and I think we should have a minute silence for her. This is the first time we are meeting in such a forum. I was at her burial representing CPA, and I think she deserves to have a minute of silence.
Honourable Gimba, I think that is a wonderful idea. Before we have the minute silence, can I just ask that all the other participants please switch off their cameras and please mute their microphones. We will begin with the 1 minute silence. Thank you. Over to you, Honourable Gimba. Honourable Gimba, you can hear me?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to be with in your mix today because the promotion of dignity of women is the promotion of human rights. The theme of this sitting is very instructive in view of the prevailing global pandemic that has affected almost every facet of life and has created the gender gap because women are more affected in this pandemic. While it is true that everyone is affected, I know, but women are most affected by the pandemic in many ways. And if you look at societal institutions, including traditional religious bodies and their leaders, have key role in upholding the dignity and human rights of women. This is as important as any practices that limits women's ability to be heard and contribute to her development and that of our society, because that will demean her humanity and amounts to abuse of human rights. Let it be noted that every woman has the right to live a dignified life and that is free from discriminations, that are free from all forms of abuse and violence, etc. We must therefore push for a change of societal norms and practices that attempt to take away this rights from us, from all women. We must also make deliberate efforts to increase women representation, especially in the parliaments and other government positions. And because if you look at issues of public policy positions, there are not enough women to represent, while we constitute a great percentage of the population. We have very little percentage to represent us. So it is important that in parliament and other public policy positions, women has to be enabled to take direct involvement in actions aimed at shaping their socio-economic well-being. I just want to give an example. For instance, in Nigeria, the yearly budget has been lacking in many specific provisions for the women of gender-related issues, as it generalizes its provisions irrespective of inherent peculiarities. A gender-based budgeting does not mean creating a separate budget, but one that improves transparency, participation, and gender analysis of national budgets. Our budget assumes everyone is carried along. For instance, a gender-sensitive budget for a ministry should show how allocation of total budget is made and how such allocation benefits women and men, girls and boys in a given society. Essentially, national budget should benefit everyone, but it is not like that. So these are one of the issues I just want to bring, because I'm sure in every part of the world, it is just something similar that is happening. And over time, the CWP Africa, in the region, in different countries, we have a kind of started a conversation on how a particular group from the CWP will look at these issues, because it is the economic empowerment of women has to start with the national budget, because that is where we should be considered. That is where the planning should take appropriate measures. So we are now working with all parliaments within Africa to ensure that these things are all inclusive in our budgets, especially in the next coming 2022. So when we come to budget, when we come to the right of women, the human rights is women's rights. And if you look at some, for instance, and if you look at the Universal Declaration, our rights are all unalienable. They can't be taken away or given away. Every woman has the right to live in dignity, free of fear, coercion, violence, and discrimination. Every woman has the right to health, including sexual and reproductive health. Yet, for hundreds of millions of girls and women worldwide, these human rights are denied. The Universal Declaration says that we are born equal in dignity and rights. This is dignity that we have, which entitles us to this rights, is also inalienable. Numerous international and regional instruments have drawn attention to gender-related dimensions of human rights issues, the most important being the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, adopted in 1979. Participants years after CEDAW entered into force, the United Nations World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna confirmed that women's rights were human rights. That this statement was even necessary is striking, because women's status as human beings entitled to rights should have never been in doubt. And yet, this was a step forward in recognizing the rightful claims of one half of humanity. In identifying neglect of women's rights at the human rights valuation in all across the globe. Because women constitute almost half of the world population and are one of the main stakeholders of every society, there is no doubt. They play unique roles in the societal and family system. Sometimes a woman appears as a mother, sometimes as a wife, and sometimes as a daughter. All these roles are respected and dignified. Despite all these international treaties, state laws, government schemes, and programs for women empowerment, equal rights and the girls' education, the condition of women in contemporary Africa is deplorable. Their rights are continually violated through genital mutilation, women trafficking, domestic violence, discrimination at work. The societal status of women in the patriarchal society seems to be dependent on their men. They are denied access to social justice and inequality. The harsh reality is that the building blocks of discrimination against women lie within the very systems that are supposed to nurture and defend them, namely the family and the community, and the societal perception of men being more superior to women is accepted. This narrative is, ingrained in the consciousness of children, even at very young ages. Covet women's women's right is human rights. She has the right to take decision on issues about her life. Of course, it is her life, and that right should not be denied. Her sexual, if you look at sexual reproductive right and health, right to consent in marriage, the right to property, right to qualitative education, right to political civil participation, labor and employment, among others. We must continually place issues that concerns women in the front burner, because violence against women is not inevitable. Families and communities can change social norms and attitudes. Governments can put strong laws in place, enforce them, and bring perpetrators to justice. More stiffer penalties. And societies can guarantee the right to sexual and reproductive health, which includes services to family planning, maternal health and HIV prevention, and the ability to make free and informed choices among reproduction. There have been great and commendable contributions over the years of women in various parliaments in Africa, but we must up the ante by providing deliberate and robust legislative safeguards as it concerns the economic empowerment, access to education, political space, and the total abolition of all dehumanizing cultural practices against women, not only in Africa, but in the world. The use of the media as a platform for advocacy against, practices inhibiting women from harnessing their full potentials must be made available so that women can easily be able to fulfill their purpose in their chosen endeavors. The justice system as an arbiter should be seen as unbiased in the dispensation of justice to perpetrators of violence against women, especially the fact that if you see a girl is in a society, a girl is raped, and then that culprit is still moving around freely without taking any action by the law, which is very painful. And that is the main reason why women usually keep quiet, even when they are dehumanized. Honorable Deputy Speaker, I don't know if my time is off.
Welcome to finish off, Honorable Gimba.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to further say, just to give an example, maybe people can have some little knowledge about my country in Nigeria. We are convinced that a coordinated and comprehensive approach will move us closer to a world where women and girls can live free from fear, violence, and discrimination. At least to reach their full potential and enjoy equal opportunity and even mutual respect and confidence with men. So therefore, we have set up in that respect an agency of government, or agencies, I can say, it's not even only one, which are saddled with responsibility of addressing and protecting the rights and dignity of women. These agencies are the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, which was created on the 14th of July 2003 by the Trafficking in Persons Provision Act. And that agency is doing very well. It goes round across the world to ensure that trafficked girls or women are brought back and rehabilitated in the country. And another one is the National Human Rights Commission, which was also established by an act in 1995 through legislation, which is essentially a wider functioning covering vasta spaces and free to waive publics of fundamental mutation. We in the National Assembly, through the instrumentality of the law, have introduced bill on the discrimination against women and other related matters bill in 2006, and a bill for an act seeking to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women has scaled a second reason presently at the House of Representatives. This will help to enforce the protocol on the African Charter on human and people's rights, on the rights of women. Despite all the legal provisions and government endeavors, the ground reality is very different. Women are still not being treated as equal to men in our continent. The patriarchal mindset should be discarded in a 21st century of forced modernization. And we must realize that women remain an integral part of the human community, and that it will be impossible to consider socio-economic and societal transformation, Honorable Deputy Speaker, in isolation without women and men together playing their due development role. So I think I'm just enjoining on all these, our participants, on all leaders, we must make an attempt of building a dignified image of women in our continent. Once the image of equality is established among people, it will last for long and forever. So my plea is for all of us to put our hands on deck to work to ensure that we build this image in the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Gemba. Some very important words there. But I would like to invite, before you close your screen, I would like to invite Honourable Naomi Nkondlo to be giving her vote of thanks on behalf of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Honourable Nkondlo, are you there? There you go.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Let me also greet and thank this opportunity. Most importantly, let me say to Honorable Gemba, in my language, Xhosa, Enkosi, the wise words that you have shared with us, that indeed I want to confirm with you that human rights are women's rights. And indeed, as a woman, we want to welcome and appreciate women professionals, women in the academia like yourselves, as we have heard of your credentials, that there is a big role that you can play in reshaping politics, in reshaping the public sector, because that is where decisions about policies, about legislations that affect the ordinary lives of women. Further than that, the knowledge that is created in the academic space, the knowledge that is produced by women in their day-to-day activities in communities. Women must be able, as you had already alluded to that fact, to influence and inform policy. No longer, after all these years and centuries, we must continue to have legislations, policies that treat women as if they do not exist. We need to ensure that the information, the knowledge that we create, the knowledge that we interact with also in our parliaments, bolster civil society, strengthen community activists and women who sit and look after their households. I want to appreciate your presence and your wise words, Honorable Gumbi. As a gender activist yourself, I think the awards that you have already received in your country The fact that even at this point you are chairing at an international level Commonwealth Parliament is also a demonstration of the power of women. And indeed, if we consider now, 42 years later, the UN Declaration Against Discrimination on Women, Girls and Children, we must be a generation of women that is impatient on realizing exactly what you have said of ensuring that we build a dignified image of women in the continent. On behalf of the Provincial, Western Cape Provincial Parliament, women also in other legislatures that have joined us, I want to say once again, thank you very much for the words that you have shared. And I think we will be going into our conversations with that information, the insights that you have provided to us, and be better in the debates that we are going to take up. Thank you very much. Enkosi.
Thank you. And Honorable Speaker, I think I should commend you for this kind of program. It is the first of its kind I have ever attended, and it has impressed me even from the program, from the papers presented overview. And I think I must confess to you that I have taken it from today to encourage other parliaments to have similar things, and will also enjoin on you for your insight, for your help, for your support while we work in other parliaments in Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Gimba, and we are always happy to assist. And in the end of the day, it's all about a unified and a team approach. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time. We really appreciate your words. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
I now would like to welcome the representative Ms. Sharon Santos from the Democratic member as a member of the Washington State Legislature. She was a community activist for more than 40 years. Sharon Tamika Santos was elected to the Washington State House of Representatives in 1998. Representative Santos chairs the House Education Committee and serves on the House Capital Budget Committee and Consumer Protection and Business Committee. She also serves appointments to the Washington State Education Opportunity Gap, Accountability and Oversight Committees, the Every Student Succeeds Act Consolidated Plan Team, and the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership. Her legislative proposals reflect her strong advocacy for providing quality early learning programs for young kids, ensuring a well-trained educator workforce, and closing the opportunity gap. Representative Santos believes Washington State must strive for providing education excellence and opportunities for all students to learn. Outside of her education, her key policy interests include civil rights, women's rights, economic and environmental justice, affordable housing, and quality public education. She believes in providing level playing fields that allow those who work hard to succeed. Representative Santos has served on dozens of boards and foundations, including the Boys and Girls Clubs in the King County, National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, and the University of Washington Business and Economic Development Program Board of Ambassadors. She has received numerous awards for her legislative and community work, including the Kip Takuda Community Leadership Award from the Asian Pacific Islander Community Leadership Foundation and the Leadership and Vision Award from Junior Achievement of Washington. A graduate of the Evergreen State College and Northeastern University, Ms. Santos has worked in the banking industry on staff to local public elected officials and in senior management positions for non-profit organizations. Due to the time difference, the immense time difference, Ms. Representative Santos has very kindly done a pre-recording address for us to view. Thank you very much, Ms. Santos. Over to the IT.
Madam Deputy Speaker Schiffer, thank you for your gracious and generous introduction. I am grateful to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians Network for the privilege of addressing this august body. As a sister lawmaker, I offer my warmest greetings and congratulations to each of you joined in this important endeavor to place the dignity and innate rights of women in the spotlight. This moment is especially gratifying to me since I enjoyed the distinct opportunity to visit your provincial parliament in 2009 as a delegate with the National Conference of State Legislatures and our Women's Legislative Network. Thank you all for your hospitality then and now. That trip remains as one of the most educational and inspirational experiences of my lifetime. In 1995, I reacted similarly after organizing the largest delegation of women from Western Washington to attend the United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women in China. The fact that these two experiences rank highest among the most meaningful and memorable for me is probably not coincidental. Each trip focused on women and, as articulated in the Beijing Platform for Action, on what is necessary for our, quote, active participation in all spheres of public and private life through a full and equal share in economic, social, cultural, and political decision-making, end quote. Indeed, I can and do credit my participation in the UN Women's Conference as the preliminary instigation for my campaign to elected office a few years later. What I saw then at the NGO forum was to me extraordinary, a universal display of women's inherent wisdom and power from every sector of the globe and every segment of society, fusing and forging together as one unified movement, a movement dedicated to an agenda for women's empowerment. I ask for a moment of your indulgence to join me in remembering what that NGO forum was like. Please, close your eyes. Soon you see a light, initially soft, but growing, brilliant, bright, intense. And then you notice colors, vivid, vibrant colors, red, blue, yellow, green, purple, orange, everywhere. Now you can distinguish forms and movement, flowing robes, graceful female figures of all shapes, sizes, and skin tones, dancing, twirling, marching, and you hear sounds, sounds of music, woodwinds, drums, stringed instruments, and voices. First one, then several, and finally hundreds, no thousands of voices of women talking, singing, laughing, shouting, all at the same time. This cacophony of sight and sound will forever represent to me the global sisterhood, beautiful, alive, and moving forward. For indeed, tens of thousands of women from all around the world had come together to develop a global vision for our future, a community in which women's voices and visions are valued. What I see now, represented in the agenda of your Women's Parliament, is a continuation, the ongoing expression of this movement, our movement, to center the intrinsic dignity and the innate rights of women and girls in the policies, practices, and laws of the Western Cape Province, shaping your beautiful part of the world into a place where women's voices and visions are valued. And I am filled with gratitude and immense excitement for you and for the promise which this day holds. I'm excited because the policies you will be discussing this afternoon are as real and as relevant to women in Washington State as they are to women in Western Cape Province. Gender pay inequity, gender responsive budgeting, increased female participation in STEM-related fields. These are global concerns which demand our attention and our action as women and as lawmakers, no matter where we live or serve. Since I serve as the chairwoman of education for my legislative chamber, I am especially interested in our shared concern about disproportionality in educational outcomes for girls and other marginalized groups of students, not only as a matter of equity, but as a fundamental national security strategy. Because in the 21st century, the welfare of our peoples and our nations will require the full participation of each and every person among us. Our education systems are, after all, the pipeline to our economic systems. Still, old beliefs and ways of working cling stubbornly to these systems. What we recognize today is institutional bias. How do we demolish these barriers which impede the advancement of our daughters' and granddaughters' broader educational endeavors? In Washington, our deliberations focus on data, on educator training, and engaging the community beyond the schoolhouse doors. The legislature established the Educational Opportunity Gap Oversight and Accountability Committee as a permanent statutory body to monitor and provide ongoing oversight of the myriad ways inequities surface for our students, and to make recommendations for eliminating all sources of these inequities within the education systems of the state. We highlighted the need to collect disaggregated data in order to better see and understand the inequities. Thus, while it's commonly accepted knowledge that girls generally outperform boys academically, not all girls do. Data that disaggregate based on race, English language proficiency, and poverty show distinct differences in academic outcomes among girls. Once revealed, we are better positioned to develop tailored responses to the specific needs of each student. Like you, we know that learned gender-biased attitudes and stereotypes must be deliberately unlearned. So we require the adoption of equity, culture, diversity, and inclusion competency standards for our educators and staff who work with students. These standards are infused in the curricula of our colleges of teacher and principal of education, as well as in mandatory professional development, recertification requirements, and job evaluation criteria. When girls begin exhibiting a loss of confidence in their abilities, our educators must be prepared to re-engage them in every academic pursuit. And finally, we recognize that our schools and our educators cannot provide all of the supports our students need. So we seek out opportunities to partner with NGOs and businesses throughout the state to bolster student interest, engagement, and participation. In this space, Washington is fortunate to have so many resources, including programs such as Girls Who Code, or Girls in Science, as well as organizations such as Women in Science and Engineering, or WISE, and Washington STEM. These organizations help provide girls with opportunities as well as mentors, because as we often note, you cannot be what you cannot see. If I took any lesson from the UN Conference on Women, it is this. We have so much to learn from one another. We all face some type of gender bias and discrimination, and we all experience some measure of gender inequity. And while specific solutions and responses may not always translate well from one country or cultural setting to another, we can nevertheless seek to improve awareness and understanding of our common problems as we work collectively toward our universal goals. I look forward to learning more from you about the substance of your conversations that carry forward from this conference. I know you do and will have much to share. Thank you once more for this incredible opportunity to address you today, and for your kind attention to my comments about our role and responsibility as women lawmakers to lift up the voices, visions, and values of our mothers, our sisters, and our daughters in our regions and in our countries and in every continent of this world. Your work inspires me. You inspire me. I am instantly transported back in time to my first and so far only visit to your country, and to a farewell dinner held to commemorate the exchange of ideas, experiences, and concerns of women by women, legislators from America and parliamentarians from South Africa. At the conclusion of the evening meal, the speaker rose as if to offer a toast or a speech. Instead, she spoke a few words in her mother tongue, and she began to sing a jubilant, rhythmic tune. And in unison, the women parliamentarians quickly stood and responded to the speaker in kind with ethereal harmonies, and then they all began to dance. We Americans sat enraptured at first, but soon understood that we had received an invitation to participate in the festivity, and we joined enthusiastically and joyfully for the remainder of the night. This image, too, is permanently etched in my mind and on my heart as symbolic of our global sisterhood, yours and mine, beautiful and alive, a sisterhood that transcends language, that is welcoming and filled with hope, optimism, and love. It was one of the most memorable moments of my life, and a gift I will always cherish. Thank you. I wish you well, my sisters, in your deliberations ahead.
Thank you very much, Representative Santos. I had to take a big swallow there. I'm going to immediately call up Honourable Deirdre Bartman to give her vote of thanks to Representative Santos. Please may I ask that our guests switch off their cameras. Ms. Michelia, if you can switch your camera off, please, for the sake of the streaming. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. As Chair of the Budget Committee and the recent journey our committee in the Western Cape has embarked upon in order to essentially review our budget cycle to strengthen oversight and public participation through the use of legislative mechanisms, I have been asked to provide the vote of thanks to Representative Sharon Santos. I would firstly like to thank Representative Santos for her address today. It has been moving and inspiring. Her advocacy for the provision of quality early learning programs, a well-trained educator workforce, and closing the gap is testimony to her dedication towards women's rights and the advancement thereof. I wholeheartedly agree with Representative Santos' statement that we need to wholeheartedly have the participation of women within our respective economies, and that this requires what she classified as a unified movement based on the cacophony of sisterhood. It is time that our governments and our treasury departments put their money where their mouths are, and your presence and participation in this conference is much appreciated, and we look forward to the use of your guidance and lessons received today to continue the fight towards gender equality within our lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bartman, much appreciated. And once again, a big thank you to Representative Santos. Before we continue, can I just ask that those members that are online and guests who have not yet in the chat function indicated which breakaway group they would like to be on, if they could do so now as we get closer and closer to the breakaway sessions. I'd like to move on to the program and welcome the Minister of Social Development, Honourable Member Shana Fernandes. She was appointed to her current role in 2019. Honourable Member Fernandes has served as Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament from 2014 to 2019, and prior to a political career, she enjoyed a 30-year career in 3 of South Africa's 4 largest banks. In August of 2009, she fell ill and with H1N1, which forced her into early retirement. In order to restore her health, her recovery period took almost 3 years. And once she regained her strength, she started doing community work and became actively involved in civic matters by serving as chairperson of the local neighborhood watch and participating in various community structures. During her tenure as Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, she served as the Rules Committee Chairperson, as well as Chairperson of the Western Cape branch of the Commonwealth Women's Parliament. She is passionate about people and serving others. Her personal values, such as honesty and integrity, are deeply entrenched. She is outspoken about human rights and women's rights and tackling the scourge of substance abuse. As the lead Provincial Minister for Gender-Based Violence in the Western Cape and a survivor of gender-based violence herself, Ms. Fernandes leads with a kind heart and a strong mind. I welcome Minister Shana Fernandes. If I could just ask that other members switch their cameras off. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Good morning, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Am I audible?
You are audible. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you. To the Honourable Premier, all Honourable Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians, the Honourable Members of this August House and other provincial legislatures in South Africa, civil society organisations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I greet all the attendees in peace. Honourable Deputy Speaker, placing the dignity and innate rights of women in the spotlight is almost impossible to discuss without acknowledging that gender inequality and patriarchy remain critical challenges that threaten the progress of living in a society that is just. The year 2020 marked the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action and was intended to be a groundbreaking initiative for gender equality. Instead, a recent policy brief of the United Nations looking at the impact of COVID on women and with the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, indications are that the limited gains made in the past decades are at risk of being rolled back. The pandemic is deepening pre-existing inequalities and exposing the vulnerabilities in social, political, and economic systems, which are in turn amplifying the impacts of the pandemic. Across every sphere, from health to the economy, security to social protection, the impacts of COVID-19 are exacerbated for women and girls simply by virtue of their sex. Compounded economic impacts are felt especially by women and girls who are generally earning less, saving less, and holding insecure jobs or living close to poverty. Unpaid care work has increased, with children being out of school, heightened care needs of older persons, and overwhelmed healthcare services. As the COVID-19 pandemic deepened, economic social stress, coupled with restricted movement and social isolation measures, saw gender-based violence increasing exponentially. Many women are being forced to lock down at home with their abusers at the same time that services, support services, and support to survivors are being disrupted and made inaccessible in some instances. As women take on greater care demands at home, their jobs will also be disproportionately affected by cuts and layoffs. One such sector being the early childhood development sector, which was virtually decimated by the hard lockdown in South Africa in 2020. Such impacts, Deputy Speaker, risk rolling back the already fragile gains made in female labour force participation, limiting women's ability to support themselves and their families, especially for female-headed households. In many countries, the first round of layoffs has been particularly acute in the services sector, including retail, hospitality, and the restaurant and tourism industry, where women are overrepresented. The situation is worse in developing economies, where the vast majority of women's employment, nearly 70%, is in the informal economy, with few protections against dismissal or for paid sick leave. To earn a living, these workers often depend on public spaces and social interactions, which are now being restricted to contain the spread of the pandemic. Honourable Deputy Speaker, as legislatures, government officials and individuals who have a seat at the table, the decision-making table, we owe it to every woman on this platform and in society to bring the challenges and injustices facing women squarely into the public domain, as well as ensuring that decisions are made through a gender lens and that the voices and concerns of women are considered and embedded in the policy-making process. Honourable Deputy Speaker, everything we do during and after the COVID-19 crisis must aim to build more equal, inclusive, and sustainable economies and societies. This is perhaps the clearest lesson emerging from the pandemic. This includes gender-responsive economic and social policies and placing women's economic lives at the heart of the pandemic response and recovery plans. Beyond this, the whole range of economic policies for both immediate response and long-term recovery need to be designed and implemented with a gender lens. This includes the removal of barriers that prevent full involvement of women in economic activities, equal pay and equal opportunities, financing for women entrepreneurs, and mechanisms to promote women's self-employment. Such economic responses would include both the public and private sectors. Equally, narrowing gender-based education gaps and ensuring women remain in and expand their participation in the formal labour market will play a significant role in providing many economies with the capacity to rebound with stronger, more equitable and sustainable growth. The COVID-19 global crisis has made starkly visible the fact that the world's formal economies and the maintenance of our daily lives are built on the invisible and unpaid labour of women and girls. With children out of school, intensified care needs of older persons and ill family members, and an overwhelmed health service, the demands for care work in COVID-19 world have intensified exponentially. And the unpaid care economy is therefore a critical mainstay of the COVID-19 response. Honourable Deputy Speaker, there are gross imbalances in the gender distribution of unpaid care work. Before COVID-19 became a universal or global pandemic, women were doing 3 times as much unpaid work as men and domestic work as men. And this unseen economy has real impacts on the formal economy and women's lives. In the context of the pandemic, the increased demand for care work is deepening already existing inequalities in the gender division of labour. The less visible parts of the care economy are coming under increasing strain, but remain unaccounted for in the economic response. Honourable Deputy Speaker, placing women and girls at the centre of economies will fundamentally drive better and more sustainable development outcomes for all. It will support a more rapid recovery and place us back on track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Honourable Deputy Speaker, we need to be both intentional and practical in addressing gender equality or inequality, especially during this COVID pandemic. And some key aspects of the work that we are seized with as the Western Cape government include, but are not limited to, a citizen-focused recovery plan that is underpinned by 4 key pillars. The first key pillar is our COVID health response, which is spearheaded by the Honourable Minister Mbombo, who will be addressing this platform. The other 3 pillars are jobs, safety, and well-being and dignity, which has expanded to include an interministerial faith-based organisation forum, and more recently, the establishment of a forum to focus on the issues of mental health, which is emerging globally as the next focus area. As a government, we have adopted a 365-day focus on gender-based violence. As the Minister tasked to lead gender-based violence in the province, we have established an internal transversal GBV forum where every department is represented by a gender champion. The role of the forum is to create awareness and facilitate an understanding of gender equality, gender equity, and gender-based violence, amongst others, in an effort to shift behaviour and the culture within government. We will also be focusing on the elimination of violence and harassment in the world of work as per Convention number 190 of the International Labour Convention. Deputy Speaker, I'm also proud to announce that next Friday, the 20th of August, we will be launching a series of webinars titled Courageous Conversations, and our very first webinar will be led by our Premier Alan Winde, who is a firm proponent for women's rights, and I am extremely pleased to see that we are starting to create and make that progress that is required to bring our male colleagues, counterparts on board as the fight for gender equality and the goal includes both men and women. Honourable Deputy Speaker, in closing, if we are to address the injustices faced by women in South African society and globally, we are all required to contribute. Whatever role you play and wherever you find yourself, a member of a family, a leader in your community, a holder of public office, you must make every effort to promote the rights and dignity of all individuals, but especially those of women. We all need to be united in placing the dignity and innate rights of women in the spotlight. And the COVID-19 pandemic allows us the opportunity to reset our moral compass globally and to focus on building a just society. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Minister Fernandes. If you won't mind that we will give your vote of thanks after Minister Mbombo, because we do know that you will be online. Thank you very much for your time. We now move over to Dr. Norma French Mbombo, who was born and bred in Matitsane Township in East London, the Eastern Cape, South Africa. She's currently the Western Cape Health Minister, having assumed the position on January 2015, the first female ever appointed in this position in this department. Before being appointed as the Health Minister, she was the Minister at the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sports. She is a mother, a human rights activist, and a nature lover. Before entering into politics, Dr. Mbombo was an associate professor at the Faculty of Community and Health Sciences in the University of the Western Cape, South Africa. She holds a PhD in the area of gender and human rights, a master's in maternal and child health, and a bachelor's in nursing science. She previously worked in provincial and local government health departments in the Eastern Cape and KZN respectively. Dr. Mbombo has held advisory and consultative roles to various ministries of health in Africa and in various multinational organizations across the globe. Her area of interest and closer to her heart is community empowerment as agency to reclaim the voices of the populations at risk, such as young women, girls, rural women, and minority groups. And she lives with her life mantra, where I am planted, I grow. I welcome Minister Nomafrench Mbombo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks a lot to other speakers who have already spoken. Special welcome and also appreciation from Honorable Khan, International Chairperson for Commonwealth Parliamentarians, Honorable Gimba from the Africa region, and also all other speakers that I need to acknowledge, including my colleague from the Social Development. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, as you were introducing my CV, I realized that I've got an option to use my other cap as a former academic, where I can just make this session academic, and then we ended up being lectured. Or I can use my other cap as an activist, a person who has been fighting, for the issues of women empowerment, where not only in the Western Cape or in South Africa, but in the whole of Africa, international. I've got that option. Or the last option is about where I wear my cap as a provincial minister of health, and share some of the practices. So, Speaker, allow me to deviate from my paper, which was I've put some input, just to talk, because I won't be able to come back in the breakaway sessions, but I don't want to leave some of the important aspects within it. So I'm standing here as a legislator. So how we can be able to influence policy, and also in terms of how to influence also the legislation across, because as I indicated, we have been protesting, trying to come up with the solutions. We have been writing papers about these. There are papers there, and also thanks to some people who pave way, especially in the UN and other contributions. We have been sponsoring some of these aside kind of the debates within the UN. So today, now, Speaker, I want to wear my cap as a legislator, but using health part of my experience going forward. I acknowledge and the placing the dignity and innate rights of women in the spotlight. It comes at a crucial time when we are grappling and juggling with a pandemic, and also a pandemic of the COVID, in addition to some of the pandemics that we used to have, which are still with us, which is the gender-based violence. And I'm excited to see sub-themes related to the gender gap parity, women in science, technology, engineering, and also mathematics, pursuing those kind of the areas, probably also must add climate change, and also about the gender responsive budgeting. These are very crucial. Now, let me indicate in terms of why these are the crucial from the perspective of the health, using the current situation of the COVID pandemic, which is affecting the whole world. For us, we learned a lesson that this is not only about the lives as health that we need to save, but also the livelihoods. Why, Deputy Speaker? It's because we do know that what we see as a health problem, not only in regard to the COVID, but it's about the upstream factors where the social determinants of health that are beyond being managed by health, but also need to be managed elsewhere. That needs the whole of society, the whole of government, the whole of the departments. So you cannot be able to create binaries, Speaker, between the lives and livelihoods, which is the health, and also about the economy. So it talks to, when we talk about one aspect of the sub-theme, gender responsive budgeting, it makes us to realize, Speaker, that currently now, whilst our budgeting has been more skewed in regard to some fewer of the diseases like HIV/AIDS at the time when it started in the 80s, 90s, it made not only South Africa, not only Western Cape, but countries throughout the world, specifically in African context and also in the parts of the Asia, where HIV/AIDS has had a huge impact, to use budgeting in regard to prioritizing some of those in regard to the risk factors. So going forward, Speaker, in the breakaway groups, let's also use the COVID as part of the budget, the gender responsive budgeting, so that it filters in, because COVID, the face of the COVID is the socio-economic ills. It's no longer about a health problem. We have seen how COVID has impacted on women. Not only are the ones who are mostly infected, but also in regard on how the socio-economic ills, in terms of the challenges related to the poverty, inequality, and also unemployment. We have seen that how the most jobs that have been at risk, that have been lost, and the livelihoods that have been lost are the ones where we find that it's mostly the women who are participating. We cannot talk enough about, because it's obvious it's there, about how the health and the wealth become twins. When you have no access to food, and not even talk about the nutritious food, because that one is a luxury, to food, we do know how it impacts on your health. When you have been a millionaire or you have had access, and then you ended up losing the businesses or even losing the jobs, whilst previously you had you had medical aid to access the private, you end up not having any other options. It means that you will end up joining and clogging the health system. It does impact on us. So what COVID shows us that it impacts on you on whatever social class or whatever race, but specifically mostly around the women, because not only about the jobs in regard to the women's space, but also in regard to women as carers. 10 days isolation or quarantine, where it's where you find that in most instances that these people have to be cared for by women, cared for at home. The majority of the people who have to do that are the women. So we're talking about women who might not necessarily be positive, but as a head of household, but because also in terms of the gender constructive aspect is that by default position, they are the ones who have to be caring for the female family members, be it your own parents, be it your own family, biological family, plus also your in-laws, the sister of the sister, my sister-in-law, even the neighbors. It meant that you ended up even putting yourself at risk, because you'll be caring about other people who are positive and yet who are not positive. Also, Speaker, in regard to also to this part of it, in regard to the gender gap parity in regard to health, in as much as that in health by default, anywhere, I'm talking now as an employer, as a sector, you'll find that the majority of the healthcare professionals are women. The nurses and the doctors, even in the Western Cape, actually in this department, we have about almost 68%. It's a female-led, including myself, who's a female. So it's a female-led kind of, but you must just zoom in regard to the different professional categories. For example, the majority of the healthcare professionals are nurses, which are actually mostly women. But you look in terms of how the system, which has always been there, and it's my profession, by the way, we'll find that the issue of the not only the resources, not only the working conditions, but also in regard to the salaries and the payment, where they've always been left behind. Yet it takes about 4 years, not only to educate at the university, plus also even the training of the, for example, of the nurses. And also take into consideration the majority of the healthcare workers in the whole of South Africa who have been infected actually are mostly those in the healthcare workers, those who are nurses, who are the majority, even the females, which has been infected. But having said, speak about the gender gap, but I also want to talk about the STEM. Yes, indeed, as I indicated that we have had many of those who have been tapping the space as the women. But if you look in terms of up to the level of the seniority in regard to managing the units and all of those, but you'll find that it just changes completely, where you'll find that mostly are the men. So going forward, Speaker, is about, for us, because it's most of our employers are women, we have had many other platforms and also interventions to ensure that we are accommodative in regard to have the gender mainstreaming as part of what we do. Even when at the time in regard to who's supposed to work at home, you need to understand that when the schools are closed, ECDs are closed, and then you are a woman who will be working there at home, you will now understand that there will be times where you have to provide that space that probably maybe is assisting the little one to eat porridge. Or you can understand why now there's quite a lot of noise. Probably it's that time where everyone now, maybe it's about time, lunchtime and all of those. So those things has to be accommodative. But we also have piggyback in regard to our strength, because we have got quite a large number of scientists who are even women. Hence, we have used so much of the evidence. Actually, in South Africa, the people who have been the trendsetters in regard to the vaccination program, when we started to vaccinate healthcare workers, were the professors, Professor Glenda Gray, and also in the context of South Africa, Professor Linda Gale, who have been pioneering as women, as a scientists on their own right. So hence we have been able to use evidence and also to use data to lead us. And also currently now we are on the third wave. We are piggybacking on those programs. Lastly, Speaker, I want to speak about the vaccination program, vaccination in regard to not leaving anyone behind. Because for us, the notion of not leaving anyone behind, it was to ensure that we don't leave those vulnerable, and most of them are the women. Hence, you'll find that in some cases, we will have pop-up buses of the vaccination site that are outside the mainstream, so that we could be able to accommodate those women who are mostly like in the farming communities or in the informal settlements. And also to use that opportunity when women are shopping, because at the end of the month, or they're having their social grants or child social grants and pension payouts and all of those, you'll know that they'll be buying food at the grocery store. So instead of now having the vaccination sites outside where women could be able to access them, we bring them to the shopping malls so that they could be able to have such access. So, Deputy Speaker, in closing, I want to indicate that with health, in as much as that in the health system, the majority are the women, and that it makes us to benefit gender-wise, because you have that gender equality balancing, that there are many women. And also economy-wise, because women are mostly the head of the households. Therefore, when they are employed, which is guaranteed, not only healthcare professionals, but even the lower levels, such as the community health workers, where you'll find that they are still there, some of them not even have been exposed to the higher education, who are the ones who are the high employer sector in that regard. Similar with the cleaning, with all other categories of the healthcare workers administratively that we acknowledge. However, as health, we have to absorb as many of the inequalities, as many of the poverty, as many of the other challenges related to the poverty within our system. So whilst other sectors might be able to turn a blind eye or choose who should respond to, but when everything fails, everything comes to help. Hence for us, we do contribute on the gender balancing in regard to that space, just like we contribute in regard to the women accessing science, technology, and all of those. However, it does have a psychological impact to us as healthcare workers, as women, plus also as healthcare workers, who majority are women. Currently with the COVID, of which the face of the COVID is no longer now only about the health problem, but is a woman who's unemployed, who is hungry, who also has got the inequalities. As we know, lastly, with the inequalities that contribute, inequalities of gender contribute to gender-based violence. Inequalities related to the class contribute to the crime that is related to housebreaking and all of those that women end up being impacted. Inequalities related to the age, that's where we see our children being raped by their fathers, by their uncles and so forth, and all of these come to us, to women. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I wish every luck and also everything to go smoothly. And Deputy Speaker, lastly, I wouldn't want this to end, because I'm saying that I'm wearing my cap as a legislator. We want us to see this happening, whether next week, where we could be able to, all of us in this legislature, specifically in the Western Cape, to say that we have done it. We've gone beyond talk shopping, but now that's what we're submitting to do it for South Africa as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mbombo. I'd like to call on Honourable Member Ayanda Barnes to give the vote of thanks to our two ministers.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and greetings to you, greetings to everyone that can hear me, the phenomenal woman. I think I've been given the most easy task here to thank one of my own, in fact, two of my own. When I was thinking what I was going to say next, I realized that actually this is the easy one because it's of our own. Matters that they raised even today are matters that we normally speak to about and address. As Minister Mbombo said at the latter part, that the only wish is for us to move forward and not be the end of it today. How do we move forward? They didn't drop the ball. I must say thank you both MECs that are present here today. At a short space of notice, I must say you've done a good job. You've addressed issues. Uniquely, I would always relate to them in different ways. For example, Minister Mbombo disappointed me today. I was expecting to hear about the Anti-SARA, what Anti-SARA is doing in the rural areas. That's how we related to each other. I didn't hear anything about Anti-SARA today, but I think I have only 2 minutes, but for every woman to know, Anti-SARA in our Western Cape Parliament is that rural woman that we are talking about. And today, Minister Mbombo didn't say anything about Anti-SARA. My wish is for us to take the Anti-SARA and the Anti-Shahida from somewhere in the Cape Flats and starting to have conversations. How do we integrate them? Minister Fernandez on the other side, one thing that I know that I didn't read about her from the biography is the love she has for children. I didn't see anything written about that. Like I said, the way we relate to each other in different ways. One thing I also know about her is that whenever you would call, she would make sure any woman-headed household where there's a female and she's a single parent, there must be food, there must be something to eat for children. I would want to thank them for their time that they are putting together. It doesn't matter how we go heads on, but at the end of the day, we have proven that as women of this parliament, we can relate and we have one agenda, which is women. Lastly, when I'm about to conclude, the only thing that I think that is outstanding that we also need to do is to bring on board our staff members that are women. They also need to voice out. This is their opportunity. I think we are doing well as the social cluster. We have set a standard, being a rural with Anti-SARA, be it whatever that's Anti-Shahida, we have done well, even with the child-headed households. I thank you very much, Deputy Chairperson, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Barnes. Thank you to our ministers. And I'd also like to acknowledge Minister Anru Murray, who's the Minister of Arts and Culture, as well as Minister Debbie Schaefer, who'll be joining us on the breakaway, who is the Minister of Education. So I'm really thank you to the executive who make time out of their incredibly busy schedule to be able to participate. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, to all our participants, we now are going to be moving on to the breakaway sessions. If I could just give you a little bit of information, all participants that have registered their interest in respect of their breakaway sessions, the support officials will initiate the process and all participants will be automatically moved. So you won't have to do anything. You'll be automatically moved to your respective groups. This may take a few seconds to complete, so just wait, and that should happen quite quickly. Once you are in your respective breakaway sessions, the Honourable Members Philander, they will introduce themselves. Honourable Philander, Honourable Maseko, and Baku Force will chair the discussions. In fact, I think it's not Honourable Maseko, I think it's Honourable Bartman, if I'm correct. That's correct. And then you have 50 minutes for this part of the program. 40 minutes of it will be the deliberation and 10 minutes will be for formulating your report back input. We have IT staff as well as scribes in each of the breakaway sessions to be able to assist the chairperson. 5 minutes prior to the end of the session, a warning will appear on the screen prompting you to wrap up, and then you will be automatically moved back to the main session. The officials will now initiate the breakaway session. Good luck, and I'm looking forward to the outcome.
Apologies. And we have received research previously regarding the gender responsive budgeting as well. And we are also here all today in order to give our respective input, to have a discussion regarding gender responsive budgeting, and to make resolutions in this regard that we will take back to the main plenary. As part of the research that has been done to us, some of the indications in gender-based budgeting has been that it has been initiated in terms of a method for addressing the gender gap, which persists in most countries and a result in women suffering economic exclusion and enjoying fewer rights than men. The research then goes on to indicate various case studies in jurisdictions, as well as the history of how gender responsive budgeting has been incorporated into various jurisdictions. But with that, colleagues, I'm going to request that I just put my video off for connectivity purposes. And I'm going to then ask that those who wish to start the conversation on gender responsive budgeting, please use the hand function for us to be able to recognize the respective persons. I will then chair those respective hands accordingly. Thank you so much. So put the video off quickly. But colleagues, with that, I will now take hands for those who wish to start the conversation or the respective subtopics that you would like us to consider for this forum. Okay, if none, I will then put one particular topic forward as a start. Perhaps that will get some of the conversation going. As part of the research that has been concluded for us, some of the recommendations included based on research of jurisdictions such as Rwanda and India and Bangladesh, that one of the important factors when it comes to gender responsive budgeting is the data that we receive in gender responsive budgeting. And in order to be able to monitor and evaluate, it is important that data is then disaggregated into programs and into indicators so that we have the exact numbers and figures in order to be able to assess and monitor and evaluate the efficacy of the respective programs that we implement in our various jurisdictions. So on that note, I'm going to ask if anyone has anything they would like to give input on, or if there's a different topic they would like us to consider in this regard. Going once, going twice. Okay, colleagues, I'm going to ask that we do have a bit more of an active discussion in this regard, as in the end of the session we will have to come up with some resolutions on subtopics. Ms. Dualie Jones, I see your hand.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. I would appreciate if we could please just put into this discussion women and addiction and their opportunity in accessing gender-centric treatment and, you know, the consideration of gender-centric treatment and diminishing barriers to treatment for women when developing the gender-responsive budgeting, please.
Thank you so much. We have a second topic from Ms. Dwelly Jones. So the first was the disaggregated data within our programs and our indicators. And Ms. Dwelly Jones has requested that we consider women and addiction, opportunity to access gender-centric treatment, and when we develop the respective gender-responsive budgets. Are there any input in this regard, or are there any new topics that members would like us to put forward for discussion? If not, okay, Ms. Monolela, I hope I pronounced your surname correctly, Mononela, you may go ahead. I'm just going to lower Ms. Dwelly Jones's hand in the meantime.
Oh, thank you, Honourable Member. I would definitely like us consider the aspect of training in terms of awareness and capacity development, because sometimes we think policies are there, legislated, and that people must just implement, for example, officials, and only to find that people don't know how to. And in some cases, it's not just in terms of implementing, but in terms of reporting also. Yes, I'm glad the issue of reporting with gender disaggregated data has been raised, but how do people, officials, know what to do? Not only that, but civil society as they're reporting, it's not all of them that we know will report in that context. So that will be first within Treasury, I would say, and then going into the different departments in terms of training for awareness and capacity development where need is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Monolela has requested that we consider capacity and training, and in particular when it comes to disaggregated data, the reporting, the implementation, that we then consider doing this through the Treasury and then to the respective departments. Ms. Mononela, have I captured that correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, no problem. I would then suggest that my original indication for the topic of disaggregated data, perhaps a suggestion for us for a possible resolution could then be that we request that our respective Treasury departments in our respective jurisdiction come up with a framework for the respective departments in our jurisdictions in order to implement disaggregated reporting within programs and indicators across our respective governments. Colleagues, I'm going to ask for input in that regard and or new topics to be put forward. If not, I will put another topic forward for consideration. Another topic that is quite near to my heart is, okay, I've received just a message here quickly. Ms. Peters is having some difficulties with her network, and she would like to highlight the issue of the discussion of basic income support, especially for women who are the feeders of families and certainly build our country. We have slightly moved towards some form of support through the SRD grant, but also it is very little, quote, closed. Colleagues, I'm going to ask if there's any input on Ms. Peters' topic. Okay, if there is no input on this particular topic, then we will put it as number 3 subtopic for either discussion and or resolution. The next topic I would like to then bring forward, if I don't see any other hands, is data collection and IT systems. It is my personal belief that we need to have comprehensive, integrated IT systems in our countries, in our different jurisdictions, in order to be able to collect data. Because it also doesn't help that we have disaggregated data on gender within our reports, our programs, our indicators, but we don't have the means of collecting such data. And I would like to suggest that we lobby for the use of artificial intelligence, machine-based learning, and or blockchain technology within our respective jurisdictions, within our IT systems, in order to ensure qualitative data collection, and that this be accompanied by adequate and or appropriate cybersecurity measures in this regard. And just to give some extra context to that, it is my sincere belief that if Deirdre, as a child, she was born, she's female, she's a girl, that you're able to monitor my progress almost from as a child until passing. And this would include, for example, being able to pull up my profile, seeing, this is where Deirdre goes to school. These are the type of grants that Deirdre qualifies for based on her family information. If Deirdre starts working today and becomes employed, these are the respective tax breaks that she qualifies for. These are the programs from the respective departments that she has been included on. And that is in order to work towards a more comprehensive system of how women are supported through various government departments, instead of looking at programs as a standalone. I see Ms. Dually Jones has made a comment on the chat box indicating 100% agreed, data informs policy change, and I completely support your suggestion. Okay, I'm going to take any hands on these topics and or new topics at this moment. I see Mr. Keswa's hand. You may go ahead, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I'm sorry to disturb. You are being requested to put your camera on. They say it's fine, the IT. Thank you.
And can you see me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I know that there was some internet connectivity problems earlier today with participants, and I thought it would be easier to keep my camera off, but I'll keep it on for you guys. Thank you so much. Okay. Colleagues, are there any indications regarding input on the particular topics and or new topics? If none, I would like to then put forward another topic. Ms. Africa, you may go ahead.
Thank you very much. On the point of data collection, we are an NGO and we submit our reports quarterly and monthly. And the information requested is mostly on output level and not so much on outcomes level. So if we can also look at the outcomes of, as you've just explained now when you talked about, when you mentioned your example, that we also monitor impact and outcomes and not only statistics and numbers, because behind the numbers are a real person, a real child, and what is really the income of the services that we render to the families and the children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Africa. Ms. Africa has put forward that we consider inclusion in our gender responsive budgeting, that we consider and monitor the impact and outcomes of respective programs. And I do think that we can include that within our data discussion as well as part of the budget cycle discussion, and how we disaggregate reporting and what type of reporting we do include when we discuss gender responsive budgeting. I will then take any input on this topic and or new topics. Okay. My last one for myself, I don't know if there are any other new hands, but last one from myself that I have in terms of my notes is that we need to consider how our respective taxes, how our respective grant systems and frameworks, and when I say taxes, I include the various topics such as levies, grants, general tax incentives, tax breaks, and things like vouchers such as that, how that system is put together in order to incentivize employment and incentivize keeping girls in school, or even incentivize keeping girls within the ECD sector. And I'm just going to indicate what that stands for, early childhood development. And in many countries, this is almost a educational sphere just before you enter into the schooling system. I'm not sure if it's called something else in respective jurisdictions. But colleagues, if there's any input on this particular topic and or new topics. Okay, if none, let me just see here quickly. Okay, colleagues. Oh, Ms. Africa, thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to raise the point of the wellness of the healthcare workers and child and youth care workers. So we have mostly female workers in the field who are exposed to all the different challenges, which I don't even have to mention here. And it concerns me how we look after the well-being of the foot soldiers in our communities, who is actually doing the hard work and who is actually face to face with the challenges out there in the community. So I don't know if it fits here, but I'm just raising this, that we also need to make provision for the wellness, well-being, debriefing. Somebody else mentioned capacity building earlier. Maybe it fits there, but of our care workers and social service practitioners, yeah, in the field. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Africa, I'm just going to summarize quickly just so I can make sure that I have this correctly. That we ensure that in our gender responsive budgeting in our respective jurisdictions, that we consider the funding for frontline services such as healthcare workers, such as social services, and that we ensure when we prioritize this funding that it is included for matters such as debriefing of workers within the frontline services, that there's funding for capacity building, and there's capacity for the wellness of our respective frontline service workers. Ms. Africa, have I captured that correctly?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, are there any other new topics and or input into the current topics before us? If not, then I'm going to stray a little bit and just ask that those who are then online just introduce themselves to everyone online, and perhaps if you can maybe just give a short 2-sentence background of yourself so that we can maybe learn some more about each other. And in between, if you do have a new topic that you would like to raise for resolution for the main plenary, you are also welcome to do so. I'm going to start with, I see a Miss Peters that commented earlier in the chat box. I'm not sure if you are able to unmute. I know you had connectivity earlier. Okay, if not, I will then...
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's really good to be with you this afternoon. My name is Abigail Peters, and I am with the Black Sash Western Cape Regional Office. I am the paralegal field worker there, and yes, I work in human rights and social security, and hence my interest in a basic income support for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to go down the chat. I'm going to start picking on people. I see the Community Women Action Group is online with us. I'm not sure what the person's name is. I only see that name on my side of the screen. If you could introduce yourself to us, please. Okay, I'm going to go down. Ms. Maseko. Are you online with us? Okay, I'm going to go down Salon. Ms. Myberg, Janine Myberg.
Morning, everyone. My name is Janine Myberg. I am an attorney in private practice, but I'm also the former president of the Cape Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And I've been the only female president elected in 217 years. So even though we've got very far with empowerment for women, we are still leaps and bounds behind. Something that's very close to my heart that is sanitary wear for young students. And I know that the young girls do not go to school at the times when they are menstruating because they don't have funds for sanitary wear. So if we could add that for condoms are provided freely, so why aren't sanitary towels and sanitary wear or the cost thereof? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Ms. Myberg. She has given us another resolution for consideration that in terms of gender responsive budgeting in our jurisdiction, that sanitary wear be provided for in terms of funding. And I would like to expand upon that suggested resolution that we even indicate that it is an essential item and that we lobby for in our jurisdictions and request in our jurisdictions where applicable that taxes, and I'm talking about VAT, value added tax specifically, where I'm not sure if it's called something else in a different country, but in South Africa it is all consumers, irrespective of how much money you earn. When you go to the store and you buy bread, for example, you won't pay value added tax, which is specified tax on bread, but for example, there will be a specific value added tax on a different item in the store. And in many jurisdictions, they still do pay that particular type of tax on sanitary items. And I would like to find out how colleagues feel about the expansion of such a resolution to include that. Going once.
100% support.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Colleagues, if I don't hear any objections or any respective input, I'm just going to assume that it's a yes then. Ms. Strickland, Judy Strickland, are you online with us?
I am. So I'm Judy Strickland. I'm the director of Hope House Counselling Centre, and we work in the gender-based violence field as well as the substance abuse field. And we're just opening a centre in Khayelitsha specifically aimed at women who have experienced gender-based violence.
Thank you so much. Ms. Monanela. I hear the Community Women Action Group. I saw your purple bubble unmuting, so you can go ahead in the meantime, because I did call upon you a bit earlier, if you are able to just introduce yourselves for us. If not, Ms. Monanela, are you online? Okay, I'll go to the... Hi.
Hi, I'm Joan Maton. I'm a nursing sister by trade. I'm the project coordinator of the organization in East River. We work with youth and women as well as men. We do skills development training and humanitarian food relief now with the COVID, and we just want to say that mostly we work with volunteers, and we think we also need to be recognized as frontline workers.
Thank you so much, and I think that's a wonderful statement that adds in to one of the previous colleagues, Ms. Africa's statement, that when it comes to frontline workers, we really do need to put our money where our mouths are, and we need to be able to ensure that there is funding available in our budgets in our respective jurisdictions in this regard. Ms. Mona Nela, are you still online with us?
Thank you. Sorry, yes, I am. Yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm currently a former teacher, a lecturer, and a teacher training college. And my passion has been science, technology, education, math, engineering, math. And I know someone might have thought I would have gone to the other group, but I've seen over all the years that I've been there, from teaching into office-based functions where, excuse me, I've been tasked with mainstreaming gender and also ensuring women and children's rights, a lot of policy development and contribution to different legislation. Hence, I was saying, I know there's a lot that government has done, but we are missing the area of implementation. There's just that gap a lot. And that's why my motivation was that if National Treasury can start doing something, developing a framework which they will definitely make sure that all departments are complying in terms of this. Because until such a time that there's transparency, there's commitment, and not just from political level, we will not go anywhere. But it should start with the public purse being those that are responsible to it being accountable to the public, and also being accountable to their own colleagues to make sure that they are also doing their part. And I know in my role as a government official, I've had a lot of interaction with Treasury officials where they would be requested to develop such kind of interventions. For example, I was also within the Department of Women when the draft, the study within agriculture, minerals, energy, and trade and industry was done. A pilot was done to see how we can implement gender responsive budgeting, just looking at those three as an example. I know it was supported by the Motsepe Foundation, but my interest really, currently I'm no longer within government, but I'm doing work within community Mbekweni area, where I'm also involved a lot with the Yeboniers and the teachers in the area. So I would still say, in addition to what one has said previously, the training, we should also look at the role of private sector in funding women initiatives and intervention, so that the corporate social investment allocations that they also have should not just be given and not follow up on how it's being used, but that they should be able to report in their respective areas to be saying, this is what we contributed as maybe part of the SRD, contributing to the linking to the SRD that government is doing. We have also contributed this, and to our credit, it has been used this way and this way. And we have seen so many women so many girls benefiting from this. So I think that would be perfect from where I sit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to summarize and expand a little bit on that suggestion from Ms. Mononela, in that that we encourage our respective countries and jurisdictions to not only partner with the private sector, but Ms. Mononela spoke about reporting of contributions. And I think a wonderful tool and a method of reporting contributions is if our respective jurisdictions uses the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for private sector enterprises to report their contributions based on those goals directly to our respective tax and treasury institutions. And the reason I mentioned the tax institutions, because then the previous topic raised by myself indicating that there needs to be a comprehensive taxes in terms of breaks and incentives and grants and how they work within one another and how they speak to one another. And should a company, for example, want something like a tax incentive or a tax break, or if we would like to use tax incentives, tax breaks, grants, vouchers, matters such as those in order to encourage employment of women, in order to encourage keeping women within education, then it might be easier to not only then receive the data, but also to monitor and implement the advancement of women's rights even within the private sector. With that, I'm going to take input or new matters, and I do see Ms. Myberg's hand as well. Ms. Myberg.
Thank you. As I've indicated before, I'm an attorney in private practice and I specialize in family law, domestic violence and abuse. And something that has been a major challenge for the last 24 years since I've been practicing is social workers. They are undercapacitated, there are too few, and people with money can afford private social workers, and that's for the likes, for example, if you need a report, can be between 45 and 70,000 Rand. The man in the street cannot afford that. The general public does not have access to the social workers because they are so busy. So I'd like to encourage funding, bursaries for social workers to make social workers or a way to study, to make it a topic that is people are encouraged to go to study that, and that people are funded and that there are tax incentives so that we can capacitate our social services. I think they're just touching the surface barely. I think they're doing the work that they can, but there is far too much work for the amount of social workers that we currently have.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, as you have heard, Ms. Myberg is asking us to put our money where our mouths are, and that we put funding towards social workers, that this includes matters such as bursaries, that this includes matters such as being undercapacitated in order to capacitate them, and in order to increase the number of social workers we have. She mentioned the request that there are certain tax incentives. I would suggest that we consider a type of tax incentive is, for example, a subsidy to universities. That is a type of tax incentive in order for us to assist with the increase also for social workers and the capacitation and training for them. Ms. Duali Jones, you may go ahead, and then Ms. Mononela.
Thank you very much. I'm just very, very briefly going to put my camera on high because it's unstable. So I'm just going to take me off again. Hi. All right, so just to introduce myself briefly, I'm the CEO and founder of Stand. and we provide treatment and support, very specifically gender-centric support in rural and peri-rural areas of the Western Cape, and also a founding member of the World Federation Against Drugs Gender Working Group, addressing illicit use and its connection to gender-based violence, whilst advocating for women's rights and contributing to the global drug policy debate. But what I'm really wanting to highlight very importantly is that there's 1 out of 8 people who need substance treatment in the world. On average, only 1 out of 3 of those 8 is female, and only 1 in 5 people in treatment are female. And this is because women have very limited possibilities to treatment. They face double the stigmatization, which poses a major obstacle for them to seek help and support. And furthermore, the treatments that are available are not there to address women's specific needs, such as childcare assistance, pregnancy, parenting, domestic violence, sexual trauma, victimization, psychiatric comorbidity, housing, income support, and social services. I know it's a mouthful, but I know that time is pressing, but that if we could ensure that those are incorporated in our gender responsive budgeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Ms. Dooley Jones, I'm not going to attempt to summarize all of that. I'm going to ask Mr. Kweza if he's gotten all of that. Mr. Kweza?
Yes, Chairperson, I'm writing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see, sorry, that was Ms. Dooley Jones. So Ms. Murida?
Good morning, everybody. I'm from an organization called Use of Quietness. It was my brainchild. We are an organization that takes from, victim empowerment to another level. We also focus on family restoration. The problem that we are currently having, and I think this has been coming up for quite a few sessions here now, or from few organizations, is that the people that are frontline workers are all volunteers. And this is something you make a decision. Yes, you want to help, but yes, there is also needs for you as a person. So yes, I would love for them to put something in place for the frontline workers. And the other thing, when I heard the lady speak about the sanitary towel things, I read on Facebook the other day, I'm not sure if it's Nyanga police station or Khayelitsha, where they actually set up a dispenser with sanitary towels. Can we take that further and have that installed in every police station, like they have the condoms, or even public places where a girl can go and obtain sanitary towels? Because yes, it is so sad that so many girls don't even go to school because they don't have a sanitary towel. And because of being embarrassed by bullying and things that goes on in school, so they rather stay home. We need to make that a priority. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Ms. Murida has echoed the sentiments regarding funding for frontline workers, especially for those who are volunteers, echoed the sentiments regarding sanitary towels, and she's expanded on the request that we resolve in terms of how we dispense sanitary towels, such as public institutions, such as schools, hospitals, police stations. Have I correctly gotten that particular one?
Yes, to the point. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I see a new point from Ms. Africa, also in the chat box. Economic development, supporting young entrepreneurs in starting their business, providing a startup kit fund, including mentoring and coaching instead of being dependent on grants only. I think that is an absolutely wonderful point, and I would like to latch onto that particular point actually. It is similar but also a new particular topic. And the topic relates also to a previous topic raised in terms of taxes and grants. And I do believe, for example, that we need a working mom's child care grant. And the reason I'm putting this forward is I believe that women are often discouraged from work because of cost of childcare, which is quite prohibitive at times. I think that this would help and assist women to have access to the job market and to purchase power and have purchasing power and determination, and that the establishment of such a grant for working mothers earning less than, for example, 10,000 Rand per month, the amount isn't written in stone, but for example, earning less than 10,000 Rand per month is necessary so that she is able to place her child and or children into care while she is at work. And that such a grant would encourage one woman to afford the ability to work, and two, to be able to place their children in aftercare. And the reason I mention this particularly is some of the persons in even my own constituency have indicated to myself that sometimes they don't want to find work because once they find work, certain grant opportunities are not available to them, and that then even with the expenses they have when they go work, that that is then taken off that amount and then ends up being less than the respective grant opportunities they may gain. But if we, for example, request our jurisdictions to set a working mom's childcare grant, this would, and if that is higher than the other grant opportunities that they would naturally get, they would then not qualify for the original, and the grant in order to be employed and have your child in, for example, an ECD system would be more than what they would get if they were unemployed and their children not being in childcare and or school. And before I go on with the introduction of the rest of the persons, I see Ms. Mononella's hand and Ms. Morida's hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I wanted to add actually to the issue of social workers that not only should they be funded and get and qualify, but there's a need within communities that school children be supported. I mean, I look at the areas we work in, issues like gender-based violence, mental health due to bullying, and all other issues that children are faced with. The parents cannot, in most cases, like it's been stated, afford a counseling professional support that is needed. And so the kids end up not performing well in their academic work, of course, added with the COVID-19 complications on school attendance. It just gets worse. It's piling and piling, and teachers are struggling because they are not social workers. So I was really proposing that we add on to the proposal that has been made that at least one social worker be assigned to a cluster of schools or where it's affordable per school, because we have had bursaries from government where in some cases social workers complete, but they are not placed anywhere. They are unemployed. We have them. We have that audit where the graduates are home. They are unemployed. So if the social development department can have an audit of some sort and ensure that they are given even if it's just a stipend initially to support schools, really, it will take us a long way. We'll be able to go a long way in ensuring that education is also effective in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Mononela has thus asked us if we can please make sure that social workers dependent on capacity is assigned to clusters of schools, and that our government partners with essentially the tertiary sector to ensure that graduates are employed where there are vacancies, so that we are able to have the increase in social workers, but also so that the social development cluster and or departments are partnering with the education departments and or clusters so that they work in sync with one another. Ms. Mononela, have I captured that correctly?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Africa says she's in agreement, and Ms. Morida had her hand up, and then I'm just going to ask afterwards, as we do need to wrap up, that Mr. Kweza just reads out what we have so far, and then we can indicate whether we agree and or would like to amend anything. But before I go to Ms. Morida, I know it is a separate topic in a different room, but I do believe that part of training and development of girls through education is very important, and that we need to support the other breakaway room called STEM, and ensuring that in our budgeting, gender responsive budgeting, that our respective jurisdictions put priority in terms of funding for STEMs in education forward, so that those in STEM are able to then implement the respective recommendations that they will essentially put forward. Ms. Morida?
I love everything that has been said, and I agree with everything. Something that I just forgot to mention was that if anything is brought forward for frontline workers or funding, things like that, please ensure that if any organization sort of does not meet the criteria, contact them, speak to them, ask them what the problem is. You see, I feel that too many are left behind because of not having somebody that is perhaps not trained to do that application. So I think we need to start empowering those that are less fortunate as an organization. Take their hand and we walk all together, and we will reach the winning line together. Because if it's implemented, it will work for every organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Morida has requested that we partner with organizations such as, for example, NGOs, MPOs, and so on, and that they are capacitated regarding the administration of departmental programs when it comes to applying to be part of those respective programs. And that includes specifically criteria that organizations must meet criteria for funding to be dispersed and implemented, but that where criteria is not met, that the departments in our jurisdictions do reach out and have a conversation with those respective organizations regarding the requirements to meet the respective criteria. I hope I summarized that correctly.
Perfect. It's perfect.
Thank you so much. With that, I don't see anyone else that still needs introduction. Mr. Kweza, could you perhaps just read back and or summarize what you have from us then in your scribing notes?
Thank you so much, Chair. Like you said, I've just summarized the salient points, and then just to get information that is needed. So quickly, if I can just go through the points that we have made. You can all hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, so here are the points then. The first one that was raised was the data disaggregation to assess and monitor effectiveness of programs in relation to women. So we've discussed that point as well. I won't get into too much detail. And then the next one is gender-centric treatment and to diminish barriers on the treatment of women. And then upgrade training capacity and development, especially for women. And then the next one is similar to point one, where we said we need to have a comprehensive integrated IT systems as a means of collecting data so that we can get more information regarding this gender responsive budgeting. Then the next one is monitor impact and outcomes of statistics so that they can be used to also do the gender responsive budgeting. And then consider taxes to incentivize girls at schools and ECD sector, early childhood development sector. Consider the wellness of health workers and social services, and look at the well-being of foot soldiers in the field. If like the one lady did say that if any organization does not meet a criteria, they need to be called and we need to find out what the issue is so they do not get left behind. They need to be trained as well to participate. Consider sanitary towels for girls. Consider budgeting for social workers, like offering bursaries and add tax incentives for social worker education. And then there was a point that a social worker must be assigned to a cluster of schools or one school, depending, and to avoid a phenomenon of unemployed social workers, even if they do receive a stipend, while ensuring the education of learners. Consider gender-centric treatment for substance abuse, as we have been told that one out of 8 people will need substance treatment over their lifetime, and one of those will be a female, and then she will get limited access to treatment, and that treatment, even if it's there, does not address the women's needs. Economic development, supporting young entrepreneurs in starting their businesses, providing a startup kit or fund, including mentoring and coaching instead of being dependent on grants only. Encourage child care grant to enable women to place their children in child care and to continue to work or look for work. So lack of child care options should not stop women from looking for employment and getting their own money. Consider basic income support for women as basic carers.
Just for interrupting you, the childcare one is for working moms, so that when you get when you're in employment, then you're able to put your child in ECD because there's already a grant for if you're unemployed. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And then the next one is consider basic income support for women.
One more correction from Ms. Dooley Jones. It's 1 in 5 people are in substance use treatment are female.
Oh, 1 in 5. Thank you for that. And then the next one is consider basic income support for women as basic carers. And then the next one, partner with NGOs and meet a criteria for funding. If there's anything I left, you can tell me quickly now before I take it back. Quickly, I'm going to email you now, Honorable Chair.
Okay, I'm just quickly going to go through the notes that I have just to make sure. We have the capacity funding for the briefing, capacity building and wellness for frontline services, including health workers and social services. I have the comments regarding including women in addiction and opportunity to access gender-centric treatment, and this must be considered in gender-responsive budgets, the disaggregated data, and that we must encourage our national treasuries to start with it and then roll out to the departments, that the respective data that is received must include impact and monitoring impact and outcomes, and when we do the reporting, that in terms of sanitary items, the funding, and that we don't have VAT on it. That, let me just quickly see what other notes do I have here. That when dispensing sanitary towels, we must focus on dispensing them in public institutions such as schools, hospitals, police stations. That for social workers, we must make sure we have funding for making sure that social workers are qualified in order for school children to be supported, and partnering between social development department and education, that social workers are assigned to clusters of schools, that there's partnering with tertiary institutions from the social development to place graduates, that funding for frontline, that organizations who do not meet criteria for funding, that there's communication with them in order to assist and for them to understand what needs to be met, especially, yes, that there's funding for the STEM priorities, that we use the UN Sustainable Development Goals in order for the private sector to report, and in order for them to report their contributions and receive incentives from, for example, tax institutions, frontline workers such as volunteers, stipends, that there's economic development priorities that receive funding, for especially for entrepreneurial purposes like starting up your own business, that we also ensure that rural and peri-rural areas are included in the funding priorities, and that there's funding for the substance treatment for women, and that these treatments are appropriate, the Working Moms Childcare Grant. Apologies, I'm not sure if I've missed anything in particular in my notes. Colleagues, is there anything we've missed before Mr. Kweza takes us back to the main plenary? Going once, going twice. Thank you so much, colleagues, and thank you so much for your participation. Mr. Kweza, with that, you can pull us back to the main plenary.
Thank you so much, Chair. It will happen automatically, yes. Would be pulled back. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much. We'll wait for it to pull us.
Put this forward as the gender pay gap proposals.
We're comfortable, Chair.
Thank you very much, everyone. I do get an indication now it's time for us to return to the main session. Thank you so much for your participation and for your valuable input. Samir, will we be automatically?
Can I get confirmation that everyone's been returned? If one of the IT can just let me know before I start.
Yes, Deputy.
Yes, Deputy.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. And thank you for the work that you've done in those breakaway sessions. I'd like to introduce Honourable Lorraine Buerter, who is now going to chair the report back session. Honourable Buerter has been a member of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament since 2014 and is doing some amazing work, and I welcome her here to take the stage. Thank you, Honourable Buerter.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. And I think that our thread throughout this program today has been that we as women have to become the ladders for others of us to climb and to excel, and not for us to become obstacles so that we can fall. I think that is the message that I get out of today. We have to be united in the differences that we pose to each other, but also to draw strength from one another. So I think that is the theme. And then with that said, Deputy Speaker, I am sure that our breakaway groups has had a good, robust engagement on the topics that we have embarked upon. So there will be 3 groups that are giving us feedback. And without any further ado, Deputy Speaker, I will now call upon the first group who has discussed the gender remuneration gap, and that feedback will be done by the chairperson who hosted that group, and she is Honourable Wendy Philander. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Honourable Botha. It was indeed a very robust and interesting discussion. We unfortunately, due to time, did not have the opportunity to slot our recommendations into the 3 main categories, which was the extent of the gender pay gap and the impact on women, the main contributing factors to the gender pay gap, as well as how to address the gender pay gap, but it was addressed in the various resolutions. So what participants deliberated on and discussed and what was then concluded on by Group 1 was the following, that we create the space and flexi time in order for women to be able to flourish within their environment. I'm sorry, we also had an issue with transferring our scribe notes. Our scribe was very sharp, but in transferring those notes. So what I have in front of me is rough notes that I make, but we will obviously after this formalize what we have, the both of us. So that was the first one. The second one was in terms of proposing amendments pertaining to the marriage regimes, to the NCOP, and thirdly, how the working mum, or rather the child care grant for working mums, as yes, that was the third one. And then fourthly, improve the financial literacy of women overall. The fifth one that was agreed upon, and that is was mainly focused on in the corporate sector, as to what was referred to as a hard stop. Chair, there was also a sixth proposal, and that was that there be an annual focus on the employment equity report, and one could then from that report see whether there was a shift or a change, and also monitor progress in terms of women empowerment accordingly. And then there was also a proposal made, the seventh one was to include the National Department of Women, the Labour Department, as well as the Department of Trade and Industry and private sector and other bodies as to advocating and promoting these proposals that was put forward. Chairperson, also as an 8th resolution, it was proposed for corporate to create the space and the facility within the various working areas where it would be able to, for creches to be established. And the final one was then for, let me just quickly see what exactly is policy saying, because the member at the time said what she gathered from the research documents was not too clear for her in terms of policies that guides us to make sure that we monitor and would be able to evaluate as such, as was mentioned in terms of employment equity as well. Chairperson, as I said, that is my rough notes, but this what the scribe and what I have, we will correlate as well, and that will be a more formal presentation, obviously. But yes, that is what Group 1 has resolved during their session. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair Philander. Well within your time, you were allocated 10 minutes, and I'm just saying to the other two groups, there are 10 minutes for you to give your feedback. Yes, you say it's been your rough notes, but it did not come across rough at all. So thank you very much, Wendy. Audience, our second group is the group who has discussed gender responsive budgeting, and the chair for that group who facilitated there was Deirdre Baartman, and I welcome you, Deirdre, for your 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. In our particular session, some of the resolutions that came forth included, firstly, apologies. I would like to thank the colleagues in gender responsive budgeting. It was quite robust and quite a number of resolutions that came up as responsibilities for this topic. The first one is data disaggregation within reporting of gender responsive budgeting, that this relates to ensuring that data is disaggregated in programs and indicators. It includes monitoring impact and outcomes in reporting, and that in jurisdictions where there's no framework for gender responsive budgeting and how monitoring and evaluation is done, that these frameworks be developed by the respective treasuries. The second one, paired with this particular resolution, is that there needs to be a comprehensive integrated IT systems within our respective jurisdictions in order for data collection and in order for us to use that data on women in our gender responsive budgeting. And this must include artificial intelligence, machine-based learning, blockchain technology, and must be paired with cyber security in those particular matters. And then we requested that there be training and capacity development of women, and this be a priority in gender responsive budgeting within our treasuries and departments. Further, that when it comes to incentivizing keeping girls in education, keeping women in education, keeping women in employment, that there be comprehensive tax incentives, whether this falls within general taxes, in specific taxes and or grants, that there be comprehensive taxes incentives for this, and this be this relates to tax institutions and respective treasuries. Then further, our frontline services in terms of, for example, healthcare workers and social care workers must be prioritized in our budgeting, and that there needs to be provision for wellness, provision for debriefing, provision for funding for them in our respective budgets, and where there are volunteers, that we work towards stipends in this regard. And specifically when it comes to social workers, that our respective social departments partner with the education system to either partner social workers with schools in the clusters or particular schools, and that the social development departments in jurisdictions also partner with tertiary education in order to place graduates of social workers, and in order to incentivize the funding of social workers in our tertiary education. This could possibly be done through providing a tax incentive such as a subsidy to universities in order to ensure that social workers students get funded and placed. Further, that there is provision of free sanitary towels for girls, funding for that within public institutions such as police stations, schools, hospitals, clinics, and where one buys sanitary towels, that matters such as value-added tax not be added to sanitary towels. We did make note that not all jurisdictions call it value-added tax, so it can assist us with a more generalized term if possible. That there be funding for substance abuse and appropriate treatment for women, and this be prioritized, that there's funding available for economic development in order to support young entrepreneurs who are females and starting their own businesses and assisting with startup funding, including mentoring and coaches, so that women do not only need to rely on grant funding, that we encourage and lobby for the implementation of a working moms childcare grant where women who are employed are able to receive funding to make sure that their children are in ECD, and this can go paired with the previous resolution regarding comprehensive tax systems, and this would then encourage women not only to remain in employment but also for the children, especially girl children, to remain in education, and that this particular type of incentive must be higher than the current unemployment grants and incentives so that it encourages people to find work. That there is basic income support for women as basic carers, and this also goes paired with a comprehensive tax system for women, that departments must partner with NGOs and MPOs and ensure that where they do not meet criteria for receiving funding related to women and implementation thereof, that the departments capacitate that particular sector in order for them to understand what the criteria is to qualify for funding. That we thought about the other group, which is STEM, and we said to ourselves that STEM will not be able to implement their priorities if there's no funding for it, and we must make sure that in our gender responsive budgeting that funding is put forward for STEM. And that in terms of the private sector, that, and this is similar to the tax incentives that must be provided, that private companies must be indicated that if they use the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to report contributions on females and empowerment of females and women that they make, that they do so to tax institutions, and that they then be incorporated in that comprehensive tax and financial type of system, so that the private sector is incentivized to employ women and for women to remain employed. I apologize, Chair, I do not know if I've missed any of the particular resolutions, but if there are any, I encourage my colleagues to assist me in any corrections in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Bartman. And you were also well within your allocated time, so thank you for managing that. And then our third and final group who will report back is the group that discussed enrollment of women in STEM, and STEM is science, technology, engineering and mathematics programs, and that feedback will be done by the chairperson, Ntombezanele Gladys Bakubaka Force. Member Bakubaka Force, thank you.
Thank you very much. The notes. Yeah, our recommendations, Chair, is as follows. In the enrollment of women in STEM-related university programs, the recommendation is any mentorship program required to encourage girls to take up the career choice of STEM programs. Women graduates and women who have taken up this career of choice to be part of this mentorship program. And the organizations such as Technovation present to girls in secondary school on STEM, and WCPP researchers should search for other organizations who offer similar. And the bursary scheme to be offered to girls for special maths classes. Learners encouraged at grade 8 and 9 level already to consider STEM as career. More research on barriers that prevent girls from entering STEM faculties and how metric results are presented should be reconsidered. Addressing reasons that girls consider maths literacy rather than pure maths. Drive government policies to accept STEM as a career and reduce fees for women who consider STEM as a career. That will be our recommendations, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Member Baka Vos, can you please switch off your video camera now? Thank you. Deputy Speaker and audience, that takes care of the recommendations that came out of all three groups, all three breakaway groups. And Deputy Speaker, if you would allow me, I want to ask that these recommendations that came out of this, that it is taken further into a discussion in the next CWP session, so that we can flesh out all the recommendations, and so that we could put timelines to these recommendations, but also that we can put together a clear contract of how we action these recommendations, so that we don't get together next year, God willing, and we have similar discussions and we have not had action steps. And I think that you would allow me that liberty to say that in this forum. So I want to thank everybody, especially the chairs who facilitated the sessions, but also our staff who was brilliant in supporting us in the breakaway sessions. And thank you for giving me the opportunity of giving the of facilitating the feedback of that session. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Botha. Thank you for doing that. It is always such an important part to be able to bring together these three very, very important challenges that women find themselves right across the planet. And you know, I really do want to thank you for coordinating that. Finally, honourable members, to everybody, our guests, our international guests, a really, really big thank you to each one of you, to our guest speakers here today, and to our members who did the votes of thanks, who contributed to the success of this online virtual platform. I believe that as a sub-branch of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians, we certainly could partner with more of our branches across the continent to support and hold the space for the empowerment of women. And so I'd like to take up what Honourable Gimba has offered to us and look at this during the course of 2022, because I strongly believe that united we stand, divided we fall. And we often forget that we feel safe when we are supported. So that would certainly be one of the opportunities that I would like to drive for us to participate in next year. To the chairs of the breakaway session, and for you, Honourable Botha, thank you for the work and just getting to the crux of the issues, being able to sift through the conversation. I look forward to that final report that we can actually use and take to the people and to our stakeholders across in the Western Cape. But very, very important, and Honourable Botha touched on this, was this event could not have taken place without the many people behind the scenes that had to meticulously rehearse each and every step. And, you know, I came in and out of these weekly meetings that we had. This was a stretch goal. It was never done before. And I'd really like to thank each and every IT staff member under the management of Mr. Skricker that led this virtual platform in such a seamless way. I know that they had to look for the technology and they had to test the technology because I wanted them to ensure that each breakaway session could be live streamed at the same time. So thank you very much for stepping up to the plate. We constantly are improving and achieving our goals and becoming that virtual parliament that makes it possible for us to communicate across borders, no matter where we are. To all the administrative staff under the banner of and the management of Sunil, for sure, thank you very much for making this happen, and to the speaker for giving us the opportunity to be able to host this very, very important event. To my colleagues across the provinces who took the time out, thank you very much. We really appreciate your participation in events like this, and we would very much like to work closer with you in future virtual events. Honourable members, guests, ladies and gentlemen, to the Premier popped in, to our ministers, once again, a very big thank you. I look forward to next week's debate and look forward to taking these resolutions, as I say, into the Western Cape. Thank you very much for your Friday. May you have a wonderful weekend. Be safe, wear a mask, and this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.